Hi, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started so we can maximize our time with our featured speaker today. My name is Karma Lowe. I'm the Senior Associate Dean for DEI Enrollment and Community Engagement, and I'm joined today by colleagues in the DEI team, particularly Sarah, who will be moderating this conversation in celebrating queer heritage.
Hello, everybody. I can't really change my display name, but I'm Sarah Dogger. I'm a social worker and also the DEI coordinator for the Columbia School of Social Work. I use they, them pronouns, and I will have our guest today come on and introduce himself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Inita D in drag. I'm also known as Zaccary out of drag. Pronouns are he, him, she, her, or Beyonce, whatever. Yeah, and I am a New York City drag entertainer.
Right, and I'm so excited to have you here today. So this is really just going to be a casual, relatively casual conversation. So for folks who are participating, you can submit questions through the Q&A box that we will have time to answer at the end, or feel free to chat in the chat. And actually right now I'll have Zach type his Instagram handle in the chat before we forget.
Oh, I will. It's here we go. I do not have well, I have TikTok, but there's like only 6 posts, so don't go there. And I don't have Twitter because birds scare me, and I don't have Facebook either because my original Facebook and Instagram got hacked. So I've just been using Instagram. If you don't have Instagram, I can send you a pigeon carrier, and we can communicate the old-fashioned way.
Right. All right. Well, it is Pride Month. So it's the end of Pride Month, but we're kind of finishing out Pride Month with a nice chat just about, Zach, about your experiences as a queer person in the local community, as a drag queen, as a biracial person. I'm also a biracial person and I'm also queer. So I just want to highlight experiences like that. But I won't talk too much because I'm moderating. But yeah, so let's just kick it off with, there are a lot of celebrations going on for Pride. Clearly this past weekend was NYC Pride. Lots of celebrating, lots of fun stuff, parties, but why is it also important to like honor this month?
I think the main thing is, I mean, you look at the reflection of why we have any type of Heritage Month or celebration of a community. One, it's because these communities 9 times out of 10 have faced some type of discrimination and prejudice, and also have been marginalized within this country. And so then we take a moment to give them back their power, celebrate their culture, celebrate who they are, and their contributions to this country, right? And so I think it's really important of having Pride Month for us because it is a way of saying you are seen, you are valued, you're important, you deserve to celebrate who you are, you know. And if I'm someone not in that community but supports that community, I will celebrate with you, you know. I think a lot of times, even on a small scale, we all look for some type of validation from others. You know what I mean? It's not that we have to have it, but it's just kind of human nature. And Pride Month itself is kind of like a validation from the rest of the country and those that are not in our community of seeing us and accepting us. And I know that statement is not true for everyone in this country, but when you have a Pride parade or a Pride Month in a town that has done it this is like their first year, that shows steps of the reach of our community, and it also shows steps of that area acknowledging who we are in our existence, you know. And so I think that's for me, that's the main reason why it's important. It's being acknowledged, being respected, being celebrated, and um, having that visibility to others of who we are. But also pride, the pride parade and like pride itself is also a form of protest. So it's still showing that we are here, whether you acknowledge us or not, like we're still here and we ain't going nowhere.
Absolutely. And so going off of that, what do you wish that people understood specifically about maybe your experience as a queer POC person living in the United States, living in the local NYC community? Yeah, what's like a couple of things you wish maybe that like people don't get, that you wish people understood?
I mean, that question is, you get that question a lot in other places, but it's such a general, I mean, it's such a wide, like a wide question and like vague, I would say vague-ish question, because like, if I wanted to tell straight people, my straight counterparts, something about me or my community, it would be that I can't speak for everyone, but I can speak for myself. I'm not someone who is gay and a drag artist to cause harm to anyone else. That's not the purpose of my life. That's not why I'm on this earth. I'm on this earth, unfortunately, to pay my rent because someone thought of rent. But I'm on this earth to live my authentic self, be true to who I am. I am a performer. I am an artist. I love expressing myself and I love using my platform to do that and make others feel joy and happiness, So if it's to straight people, I'm not concerned about you. I'm not trying to ruin your life. I'm not trying to ruin your kids. I'm not trying to ruin society. I'm just trying to exist. If it's to politicians, there is no hidden agenda behind being a queer person. You know what I mean? If it's to other queer people, my message would be like, even if I don't identify in the same label that you may, like if I'm not, like I'm a cisgendered man, meaning I'm not transgendered. I identify as he, him, and the male in and out of drag, but like when I'm in drag, I'm a woman. But if someone is trans or bisexual or asexual or lesbian, even though I'm not under that specific label, what I would say to them is I'm still here for you in whatever capacity, So that question is like, it depends on who I'm speaking to, and a lot of times we find ourselves speaking to our straight counterparts because there's these misconceptions that we face. So that'd be my message to the different groups that I know of or a part of.
No, absolutely. You're absolutely right. It does depend on who you're talking to. And I think knowing you and your platform, I think you're really good at like being present in different ways for different communities and knowing how to talk to heterosexual people and knowing how to talk with politicians. And I'll throw in there as part of the conversation, we were talking about this before, that you did a drag performance yesterday for an attorney's office in Brooklyn, and
yes.
that's really cool. Actually, what you want to share a little bit about your experience there? I know we talked about it. But...
I will be honest, and I'm to everyone that is watching, I'm sorry that my voice is so butch because it's been Pride Month. So Pride Month is busy season for a lot of drag entertainers. And so I will be honest, I agreed to doing this gig and went through the motions of emails, confirmation, sending invoice, the usual. And I put in my calendar per usual, and I just usually write like where it's at and the type. So I just wasn't like, when I was getting ready for it yesterday, I was like, I know it's in Brooklyn and I know it's an award show. And that was it. Like I didn't really, like, I wasn't sure like where, like what company this was for, whatever. So when I arrived and we had to go through security and everything, I was like, oh, I'm at the district attorney's office. And yes, the event was like a kind of lunch, like a luncheon event. So a lot of people were still working, but they were on their lunch. This was being held. So everyone's in like suits and ties and stuff. They were giving out some awards to people that have been very influential during this year, to our community, whether in Brooklyn or just all throughout New York. And so that was really nice to see. I met a trans woman who is like an assistant district attorney that works in the office. She's like the first openly trans woman to work there, and has been with this, like with them for about 20 years or so. So like a lot of
Fantastic.
people, yeah, exactly. And they just transitioned, I would say, I think they said like last year was when they like first came out and started transitioning. So it was really great to hear their, and they received the Stonewall Inn Gives Back initiative awards. And it was really interesting to hear their experience of starting there as a male, you know, and knowing that they were already trans, and then the coming out process and how they had to go to HR and figure out how to do this in a way that was like safe for them, comfortable for the company, you know, all these things that are unknown. So that was really, I think that was the most like enjoyable thing, was seeing someone who started off 20 plus years ago as a male there, came out and was welcomed with love and acceptance from their coworkers, from the office, from the DA himself as well. And then me being able to have a moment to just talk to them and because the majority of them were straight that were there, and let them know about like, yes, I'm glad you're at this event getting free food and a free drink, but like also understand the purpose of this event, and like also understand what it means to truly be an ally. So overall, it was great. I was very pleasantly surprised about the event, but same thing, the way I spoke to them was different than the way I would speak to like people that come to my events at bars, you know. And that's just the business of it. But I had a great time. So like I'm official, y'all. I'm like an assistant DA.
Right, sure. Well, you didn't you want to be a lawyer before
Yes.
you,
That
yeah.
before doing drag, I went to Pace University, and my plan, my like business plan or like career plan, was to go there for business, international business, and then go to Pace Law in White Plains and become a corporate lawyer. Well, looks like I'm getting there.
That's really amazing though, that, you know, and New York City, Brooklyn in particular, is, it's different than the rest of the United States, of the world. Like that, I'm sure wouldn't be happening in, I don't know if that would be happening where I grew up in Connecticut, you know,
Yeah.
like it's
Or like Tallahassee or like Nebraska. Yeah, no, it is true. That New York City is a very diverse place, and I think sometimes we forget how open-minded and diverse this city is, and we assume that every other place of the US is like this, and then the moment you travel, you instantly see that it is not the case, for a lot of places in America.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, and kind of going off that, so for a lot of participants in this webinar are social work students, social work faculty, staff, and social workers, as you've probably heard me say, are everywhere. You know, we have social work. I have colleagues who work in nonprofits, in policy, in legislative offices, with lawyers. So going off kind of what we're talking about, how do you think social workers and just people participating in this can keep intersectionality in mind in the work we do, whether it's like clinical work, being a therapist, or working with nonprofits, or in district attorney offices? How can we keep intersectionality, whether that's like queerness, race, gender, whatever it might be, keep that in mind in our work?
I think, well, so two things about that, and also we did get a Q&A, so I'm like, yay, this is fun. I love this.
Yes, somebody
Y'all don't
submit, yeah,
understand.
keep submitting those questions.
Please, because 9 times out of 10, no, almost 10 out of 10, when I'm doing any type of pride or a gig, I'm usually in a wig, full makeup, and throw my body on the floor for $1. So to be able to like actually sit down and speak and just share my experience as an artist and being queer is really great. And I wish I could do it more, but everyone wants to see me dance like it's Cirque du Soleil. So anyways, I think being mindful, like with intersectionality is, I mean, there's different layers to that, right? First, for me, the one thing is representation in any place that you're working, right? So like with my platform, whenever I work at places that might be dominant by a certain race, like let's say if I work at a space that majority of the people that work there, or the cast of drag entertainers that have shows there are white or are cisgendered. As someone that is biracial, but I'm not trans, I try to, if I can have a guest spot, I'll book people that are POC or trans and POC to work there to bring that representation in. Because if you visually see someone that is of a different culture, I think it's great because then people that relate to that culture can also feel maybe more welcomed or seen or understood and go and either like feel more comfortable in that environment, right? Secondly is being someone, if you are someone that is trying to be mindful of that, I think also educating yourself in several ways is important. If you want to be respectful of another race or of another culture within your workspace or within any area that you may be occupying, that frequently, it's always good to do a little research. Also, like the internet can be tricky because some information on the internet is not correct. So I think, I know that there's been this thing, like, I'm just sorry if I'm bouncing around a little bit, but like during Black Lives Matters movement during COVID, there were a lot of people within the Black community that were like, it's not my job to educate you. And, you know, if that's how they feel, it is not. Honestly, people can do their research. There's more enough resources out there. However, if someone was to approach me respectfully with some questions, just out of curiosity to be respectful, I don't mind taking the time to answer them if that helps them to be more aware, to be more respectful, and to be more welcoming to my communities that I'm a part of. So if you are someone like, let's say if you're at a workspace as a social worker and one of your coworkers is a trans person and you're not sure when it comes to maybe the bathroom or maybe when you see them or like how you address them in pronouns or so forth, or if there's someone that's non-binary, right? I can't speak for everyone, but if you have great intentions and you ask respectful questions, I think that's a good way of showing that you are also trying to make the effort to be inclusive, to be aware, to be respectful, and to allow that inclusivity within the workspace. Okay, because there's ways to ask questions, and sometimes people ask questions in manners that are rude and disrespectful, we know. And sometimes people ask questions because they're genuinely and authentically want to know, or they want to learn because they recognize their lack of education within that or understanding within that field. Yeah, so those are the two ways: representation and doing your research in whatever capacity that is two ways to make sure that you're being aware of the intersectionality within workspaces or places that you occupy. Oh my God, it sounds so professional.
Yeah, I agree with that, and you know that a lot of what you said is my existence as a non-binary trans person. And I'll add just quick that the something I've appreciated that I've noticed that my like cisgender queer friends will do is if we're at an event and there's not like a single stall bathroom, I'll be like, hey, where's the bathroom? And they'll be like, it's here, and then they'll be like, oh, well, which one do you want to use? You know, and I'll say like, well, probably the men's room, but depends on how clean it is. And so I appreciate questions like that, and like not every non-binary person wants to be asked that, but in spaces where there's not gender neutral bathroom spaces, especially just asking like, hey, what bathroom do you want to use? Like, I'll direct you to whatever.
Yeah, I think also like a little quick thing add on to that, and then I would love to answer this question too because it relates.
Yeah, we can do the Q&A as we go,
because it like relates to what we're talking about anyway. Is like small gestures. I have a list, y'all, so it'd be hard sometimes trying to say these big words. But small gestures like that you could do is to make spaces more welcoming and to make spaces diverse. Is if you are working with someone that is non-binary, or you're working with someone that is trans, you don't need to say that they're non-binary or trans. Like that's not your place. That's kind of like the person's place. But like one thing I try to do, even when me and Sarah are meeting, if Sarah's meeting new people with me, is I'll say like, this is Sarah, and then pronouns are they and them. You know what I mean? Or if I'm talking to a friend of mine, even if Sarah's not there, I say, I'll if they're using the wrong pronouns, I kind of like give a light correction to that. And I think that's a way of just being aware and being respectful of other people that work with you that may be in different communities. So those are like some small things you can also do to make the spaces feel welcoming and safe for people who are under those communities that work with you as well. If you are someone that is like an ally or someone that is not, that is binary or that is not non-transgendered and cisgendered, you know what I mean? Yeah. Oh, this
Yeah,
is
and I appreciate those corrections when I'm not around, or when like somebody uses they them pronouns, or just not the pronouns maybe typically associated with whatever their name is.
yeah.
Yeah, just giving people a note when the person's not, when the person is around and the person's not around. Super important. Okay, do you want to, you can see the Q&A,
Yeah.
right?
Yep,
Okay.
I can see it. I was looking at it right now. So I'm gonna answer this one because it's shorter.
Yeah.
I miss Zaccary's sexuality. I heard that he is not trans, but miss his sexuality. I am gay. Well, that
Really?
sounded gay to say. Anyways, yeah, I am a gay cisgendered man. I am, but I gotta say my sexuality sometimes is always like, it's very fluid. I think human beings were always evolving. And I'm learning more about what I am attracted to day by day. But as of right now, at 12:44 on June 20, who cares? Pride Month, I am a gay man and a cisgendered gay man. So thank you for the question. Someone else, anonymous attendee. These are fun. I like these. They said there have been. Are the participants able to read these questions too?
I don't know.
All right, so I'll just read it real quickly then,
Yeah.
in case anyone, the participants aren't. There have been questions of allyship. Oh, I think someone answered. Oh, no, they can't. Okay, great. Thank you, Tracy. So the question was, there have been questions of allyship, and if it is, one, real, and two, as helpful to those affected. Also, everyone who are sending these questions, they show up to the panelists as anonymous, so we won't know who's asking them, so you can feel more comfortable to ask any questions you may be curious about. Just wanted to let you guys know. And the people that are attending cannot see who sent these questions either. They said maybe there should be something else. Someone said that maybe there should be people who can use a different word to say yes. Like if they're an ally, I'm assuming. I will go to jail with you because I really am with you kind of thoughts. I think allyship is real. Because I have experienced my straight friends and like counterparts, I guess you could say. I wouldn't say counterparts, it sounds like we're like against each other, but straight people within my life that call themselves allies that have shown up and shown out. I have seen, when I have been ridiculed by people maybe or made fun of, and I'm around straight people, them defending me and getting back at whoever is trying to bully me in a sense. I think it is true. And I think the reason it's helpful is because there's strength in numbers. So if I'm trying to do even the smallest thing is just get to the gig or just work my shows during the week, and I know that even if I go to a gig with my straight friends, I will feel safe. And if I feel safe, then I will enjoy going to work because my job is at bars and venues and stuff. I think the issue that we face is that there are people that say they are allies and they just say it for the convenience and for the clout. This is a great question to ask you because at the event yesterday at the King County District Attorney, my main statement to them was that being an ally is not reposting someone's Instagram story. That's a nice gesture, but that's not where it ends. You're not an ally to be when it's convenient, and then you're not an ally when it's inconvenient. You know what I mean? Being an ally is supporting a community even when it's rough, because you're supporting that community because they are fighting for something that they deserve and need, and that's normally equal rights compared to other people, right? So being an ally is going to a parade. Being an ally is going to protest when there is the risk of people being locked up, or there is the risk of people being confronted by other protesters. You know what I mean? Being an ally is sticking up for community when you're around your family members who are saying homophobic things or transphobic things, or supporting people who are transphobic and homophobic and racist. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like, oh, I'm an ally because I walked the Pride parade with like my company, or I'm an ally because I posted Happy Pride on my story. Like, that's not an ally. That is someone that is celebrating us in a sense, but being an ally is showing up when it really is tough. And so I think we get the issue of a lot of people saying they're allies, and then when it comes to actions, to their words, they don't follow through. And that's the problem we face, and where some people might not feel like allyship is real. But honestly, it is. I mean, even if you take before queer liberation, look at simple things like freedom for Black people and equal rights for women, right? You had white people walking in the marches with Martin Luther King and other people and other Black people in America that were protesting and doing marches and doing events. You had white people with them because there was strength in numbers. You had men walking with women who were trying to fight for their equal rights to their male counterparts. Do you know what I mean? You had gay Black people that were walking with women to give them equal rights because they knew what it meant to be marginalized. You had Black and brown trans women and men that were walking with their straight counterparts and straight women and cisgendered women to fight for their rights because they understood. So allyship is real. It just depends on, are you really an ally, or are you just an ally for show? Basically.
Yeah.
Oh, we got questions.
And Karma also was saying in the chat that she prefers co-conspirator, which I also like that term. I think that in my circles, maybe we talk about like being an ally is an active thing. It's not a verb, but it's a verb.
Right.
And so I think we've been differentiating between like ally is kind of like the passive, like kind of what you were talking about, and co-conspirator is more of the active, like what you were talking about. People
right.
who
I'm
are
gonna be there with you. I'm gonna be right there throwing
acting
another brick to
yeah.
start another Stonewall riot. Yes.
Yeah, and also like we live in New York City and Stonewall, and we've both been to Stonewall. And I think today is the anniversary of the start of the Stonewall riots too.
Yeah, because it was June 28th, 1969. And then the year after, 1970, was when the first like Pride parade / protest started. It was like, I think it was the Gay Liberation March, and then it became like queer, and then it became the Pride Parade. They had 3 different names. I was just in the pageant for Miss Stonewall, y'all. So like, there's a lot of information
I was
coming
waiting
in there.
for you. Like he's good. Yes. So
I don't want to like put out my resume because that's just obnoxious.
I mean, like let's say it. You deserve to. So you just won runner-up for Miss Stonewall 2023, and that's amazing.
I did. So I still have all that information that I researched that I didn't apply yet in my head. So yeah, right. When you say Stonewall, I'm like, all right, here we go.
Yeah, people are giving you claps.
Right. Oh, yay, thank you. Someone just said, what pronouns should we use if we haven't been able to ask the person for their pronouns? I'm gonna speak for my own experience. I like when I'm meeting someone new, and okay, there's a lot of thoughts about this, but when I'm meeting someone new, I think it is just human nature, and through the conditioning of society and what we have seen of like what gender looks like on people, that when I visually see someone, there is already a like analysis of them and what I assume is their gender or gender expression, right? And so being in this community and being a part of this community with people who are non-binary, who are trans as well, knowing that I'm already assuming that, like, for instance, I'm like, oh, I think that's a woman, or I think her pronoun or their pronouns are he and him, or they look very androgynous, maybe their pronouns are they and them. If I'm able to have a conversation and say hi to them, I ask their name. I use their name first as much as possible before I get into pronouns. And then this is just me, and I can't, like, I think Sarah could jump in and share from their own experience too, being someone who non-binary. But for me, like the same, if I'm not sure what pronouns they use and I haven't been able to be like, hey, what are your pronouns, by the way? I will say like they, and because it's just like, like we use they in the English language, even when we're speaking about someone who already told us their pronouns, when we're talking about them like as a third person sometimes anyway. And so for me, I find it like the safest way that I'm not, even if the pronouns are like he and him or she and her, I haven't received any negative like feedback when I say they, them, from anyone that I've used it with. Because for me, it's like a general pronoun also. I'm sorry if this sounds in any way disrespectful, Sarah. I'm just like sharing my experience. But if for me, and my mindset is like they, them is like the safest way to go, because if they're not, they can say he, him, she, her. But if they are, then it's like, thank you. And then when I get the chance to ask what their pronouns are, I'll ask them. But as opposed to like, if someone is going by she, her, and I say he, him, I will see, because it's like the opposite pronoun, I will see a negative like reaction, or sometimes like a kind of I'm offended reaction, if that's the case. But when I say like they, them, I don't see that. So I use their name first, they, them second, and then I try to like at some point ask their pronouns just to be respectful.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the best way to do it. And I don't think there's like a 100% like sure way to do it, but like, there are people who don't like they, them being used for them, like that makes them dysphoric. And there's also like so many neopronouns is the term for it, but being that people use that are there's new ones being discovered or kind of used every day, and those are neopronouns, and like some people only use neopronouns. But I would say generally, I agree with what you say, that they, them is like the easiest way to, like their name, and then they, them is the easiest way to start. And then you can ask, it can be as simple as like, hey, these are usually, I offer my pronouns first before I ask somebody their pronouns. So I'll be like, hey, like, by the way, my pronouns are they, them, like what are yours?
Yeah.
Yeah, just so it's kind of a two-way street, because it can turn into moments of this person looks androgynous, so we're just gonna ask them their pronouns. And then then I feel kind of like the alien in the room.
Right. Because you're like
so,
the only one acknowledging.
But I would say generally that's the best way to do it.
And I think the most respectful way is sometimes just asking in a nice tone, even if you take a moment from the conversation you're having. I do that sometimes too. I'm like, I'm so sorry, real quickly before we keep going, what are your pronouns? So I can just be like respectful. I've never gotten a negative feedback from that. You know what I mean? Sure. It is trickier, the dynamic, when it's a group setting of a lot of people meeting each other. Mm-hmm. Where there, like Sarah was saying, where there are people that look more androgynous than others, and there's people that look more definitive of what, like I said, society has conditioned us to identify as male looking and female looking. You know what I mean? Or like male gendered looking and female gendered looking. Yeah. So it can be sometimes awkward. And again, this is like new-ish language, or like introduction of the use of language for us. So there is uncomfortability in change, and there is uncomfortability in learning and adjusting, and that's okay. But like, if you have great intentions and you come out respectful in how you act, like just saying, I'm so sorry, what are your pronouns again? Or if you are just taking a moment to introduce your pronouns and then ask theirs, I think it'll help. And although it may be awkward at first, then you just keep moving it on with the conversation. I think what makes it more disrespectful is when someone is asking pronouns and then they continue to stay on that topic about the pronoun usage. Like, yes. If you're like, what are your pronouns? They and them, and then you're like, oh, okay, that's so hard, because they and them is like used for multiple people, but like, I'm gonna try my best. And it's like, oh, all right.
Yeah, no, I truly like I've at least once a month I have an instance where, you know, I'm interacting with somebody and I'll say my pronouns and they'll ask and I'll say them and they'll be like, okay, I'm gonna try. Or they'll be really apologetic about, you know, they'll misgender me, they'll usually say she, her instead, and they'll correct themselves and then there'll be like 5 minutes of apologizing.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and
It's
I think
like,
the easiest way is just to ask and then move on in the conversation.
yeah,
Because
yeah,
otherwise, again, then like people like me, non-binary people like me, or people that use they them pronouns can feel just kind of singled out. Then, you know, all the attention's on me and I feel like this anomaly in the room and it can be awkward. So
yes.
yeah, I think that's
Oh, this was a good one. Do you
yeah,
mind if
let's
I go to
we'll do a few more
and
Q&A
then you can
questions
go?
and then I want to get back
Oh
to
yeah,
some of
Sarah
the
got
topics
questions
that I
for me,
planned,
y'all.
and then we'll pop back to the
Yes,
Q&A. But
sorry
I
about
love
that.
this. No.
If you don't know, for those that are just joining us, Sarah and I are friends outside of this event. We have
Yeah.
been friends for a while now, and I know Sarah's ready to analyze me. So
Not, you don't,
this is my
that's a social work stereotype.
uh, you're
People
right.
sound off in the chat. We don't all just analyze our friends, right?
She's trying to get the good goods and ask me the good questions, which we normally don't get to talk about because I'm always wearing a wig and throwing my body around like Cirque du Soleil. So I'm excited to get to that. So let's do one of these questions,
Yes.
and then we can go back to, you know,
Right.
where
And
you.
I will just say you said she, and that's because you know
Oh,
me.
yes,
And
yeah.
that's because you're
Oh,
saying it in like a queer culture way,
yes.
just so people understand that in the context of conversation.
Right. And to get into that real quickly too, yeah, there is like gay lingo, like queer lingo too as well. Like girl, the word girl, it's used in the way of like being like, girl, let me tell you about it. Like, and sometimes that too, for some people that identify with certain pronouns don't appreciate that or don't like being called girl. And then there are some that understand that or they are okay with it because the meaning of the way it's used is different than being a gender identifier. And so for those that are in this chat right now that are listening to us, sometimes the banter sometimes that we have may seem gender specific, but it's more of like a queer lingo, like colloquial,
Yes.
like kind of thing.
It's something we've talked about previously, and you know, it's something that it's one of those things that just like in any culture that, and this can apply to queer culture or different racial cultures or whatever
Yeah,
ethnic cultures, there are certain terminologies that maybe we use for each other that are not okay for people outside the community to use, and maybe we can talk a little bit about that later.
absolutely. So someone said, please do not be offended, but accept this question from a place of ignorance. But please explain the difference between trans and the process of understanding their gender, and then how this affects the person's status as non-binary. In other words, should a person be non-binary only? So sorry if it is offense, but again, this comes from a place of my ignorance. Oh, thank you. I mean, the difference between trans and the process of understanding their gender. Well, from my own experience, someone who's transgender, and I have friends in all different like that are in different stages of their transition. Okay. Being transgendered is identifying with the other gender than what you were assigned at birth, right? And so, like for instance, I have a friend who was born at birth a male, identifies as a female, and is going through the transition of hormone replacement therapy, and will soon be going to more procedures that will help to shape their physical appearance in a way that is what they see mentally and how they see themselves as their true gender. They also started off as non-binary before coming out as trans, because and when I had conversations, it was just like, I don't really like the term he him. I don't really like those pronouns. I never really identified as only he him. I feel like there's this other energy to me. But I think also that storyline for this trans friend of mine is not the same as my other trans friend. I have other friends who are trans that only identify as that one gender. You know, I have some that are trans that also are non-binary. Binary, like the binary code is like male or female. Being non-binary is not, and correct me if I'm wrong, Sarah, but in my mind and from like what I've asked questions about is like being non-binary is not being like identifying with just one of these gendered identifiers. You know, it's being in that area of being both male and female, being and being like two-spirited in a sense, kind of. Whereas like there are trans people that just identify with one gender, and then there are trans people that identify with this one gender, but also are non-binary. And so it's a wide spectrum that can seem confusing. Even myself, being a queer person in this community, I'm always learning, because it's also like it's people, like it's like different for each person and their experience and how they identify. Like for a smaller example is a lot of people assume that if someone's transgendered, that they're going to get all the surgeries to like gender affirming surgeries as they're transitioning, and that's not the case for every person that I know that's trans. There are some people that are trans that plan to do no surgeries except for just hormone replacement treatment. There are some that I know that are doing only certain surgeries, you know, like maybe female feminization surgery, or maybe laser removal for hair. And then there are some that are like, you know, and so everyone's journey and transition is different, but you won't know that unless you like have a conversation and talk to them and like, you know, get to know what where they see themselves in a few years and how they see them, like what's the image of themselves being someone who is trans and to be their true authentic self.
Yeah, I agree. I think I get this question a lot from people I work with about like the difference between, so the queer community has a lot of terminology, right? Like there's a lot of terminology, and sometimes it can be overwhelming, and it's not necessarily helpful for, like, I just say I'm queer. It can be exhausting to
honestly
throw in all the identifiers, right? I think but to like this question specifically, I think maybe they're getting at the difference between like trans and non-binary. So like, so there's cisgender and transgender, and cisgender, it sounds like cis, like sister. It's CIS, and that's like the Latin prefix of, I took Latin in high school. So it's like the Latin prefix of cis versus trans, and trans is like across, and cis is like same. So,
and real quickly too, to clarify, if someone is cisgender, they identify with the gender that they were assigned at birth.
Yes.
So if you were born assigned male at birth, right, and you identify as male now, you are cisgendered. If you were born, let's say, male at birth, but you identify as a female, then that is transgender, because you're identifying with the other gender, not the one you were assigned to at birth. Just to clarify language. Absolutely. For people that are in the room.
Yeah, and I feel like also like cisgender, I don't know, to me, not being a cisgender person, like cisgender feels like a one thing. Like you identify with the sex you were assigned at birth. Transgender is more of like a spectrum or galaxies. So like when we say non-binary, like kind of how I feel as a non-binary person is like, I don't feel like a woman or a man. I feel like something in between or kind of separate from the binary genders. But I also will say that if people are asking me like, do you identify as trans, Sarah? I'll say, yeah, I do. And that for me personally has come in since I got top surgery 2 years ago. And since top surgery, I do feel like more, for me, it was more of like, okay, I feel trans and non-binary now, but that's just kind of my personal experience. It's very hard to answer these questions that aren't in like a definitive way that isn't just talking about.
And I think
experiences.
I think this is a place of just being honest for those that are in this room right now. As you can tell, the community is the queer community, LGBTQIA, is beautiful.
Mhm.
The challenges that are faced when you have so many different categories under this umbrella organization, not organization, under this umbrella community, is that you have a lot of differences labeled under one group, right? And so within that, you have a lot of people that are also in in places of those groups. The other thing to know, and I think this is really important because this is someone had a question about this, and I think this is good to help clarify even more, is that when it comes to binary and non-binary, that is just talking a specific and transgendered or cisgendered. Those are just talking about your identity in terms of your gender and gender expression, right? So like we said, trans is someone was assigned this gender at birth, and they feel that they do not identify as that, they identify as the other, right? Non-binary, is someone that is both or a none, like they don't identify as one specifically, they're in between, or they're a mixture of both. Okay, those are all gender expressions that has nothing to do about sexual orientation. So being lesbian, being gay, being bisexual, being asexual, that's a different category. So if you think about it in terms of branches, trans, non-binary, trans, cisgender, which are counterparts of each other, like the opposites kind of. Binary and non-binary are about gender expressions. Gay, lesbian, bisexual, and asexual are about sexual orientations, and that deals about who or what type of person you are attracted to. So you have a branch that deals about how you view yourself, and then you have a branch about who you are attracted to. That's all under the community. So you can see how the challenge of us figuring things out and having a correct answer for some things can be tricky because there's so many components under our community that it can be confusing even for people within our own community. Okay, and then there are stigmas and stereotypes and assumptions that are attached to each individual sub community within the queer community that we sometimes have to combat too. So if we sometimes get stuck up on these questions, just know that we're trying to figure it out as well. And like I said too, you take in the fact that everyone is an individual and everyone has their own story, and you throw that in there and it makes it even more complex. So to just compare it, you have the queer community that has identifiers on sex, like gender expression, and identifiers on sexual orientation. But then if you look at another community, let's say like the Black community, you might have gender titles like Black woman and Black man, and then you have maybe orientation, but then you'll have let's say we have the deaf community. There's maybe the deaf community is one branch, and then there's maybe one that's deaf but has hearing aid, and deaf but just only does ASL. So it's a smaller scale, and then you got queer, and it's so our community is very vast. It's very big. It's very complex. And so there are things that are still evolving and changing and finding ways that makes everyone feel inclusive and comfortable and welcomed.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Tracy, I think we answered your question that cisgender is more about gender identity, and cisgender is more about gender. Yeah. And heterosexual is more about who you are attracted to.
Cool. Look at banging these questions. These are great questions, everyone. Thank you for asking these questions. And I also want to say thank you too for acknowledging if you don't or just prefacing your questions with being don't mean to be offensive, or I understand my ignorance, or I understand the lack of knowledge that I have in this question, this area that I'm asking. I do appreciate that, because that's like the questions you asked about asking someone about their pronouns. It's the same thing. When you preface something in a way that shows that you're just trying to be authentically curious, you just want to learn and you don't want to be offensive, it makes the reception of whoever you're asking that question easier. So whatever you're doing in this Q&A, do that in real life.
I love all these anonymous questions. We're going to pause the questions for a second just because I want to make sure we touch on some other topics.
Yes.
And then we will come back to these questions in the next half an hour. Wow,
Yeah.
time really flies.
I love it. This is what I wish I could do as a career.
All right, so now I want to switch gears a little bit. I personally want to hear more, and also because of the topic of this, your experiences being like a biracial person, being a person, because you're black and white. Let's say that you're not just biracial. Like I'm white and Indian, and you're white and black. So
yes, I am.
Yeah, and you're so passionate about being biracial and being half black and being ingrained in the culture, and especially your experience with ballroom and just
Yeah.
Talk about it all.
Okay, I'll talk about it all. Okay, so just to give you a little knowledge, like a little preface too of my upbringing too as well, which I think has shaped me in terms of my experience of being biracial and my relationship to the races that I'm a part of, right? I was born and raised by my mom. Like, I mean, obviously I was born by my mom, but I was raised as a single parent child. My mom was the one that raised me. My mom is white. She's from Canada. So good old Snow White, literally. And my dad is black from like North Carolina. But because my mom is like the only one out of her family, kind of like the black sheep, that dated outside of her race. And back in the day when she first was dating men of color, like where the family that she came from was very kind of conservative. Like they didn't even talk about sex, kind of like very traditional, old school. So my mom moved to New York when she was 18 and has always dated men of color since. But because of dating men of color and mostly black men, my mom has been one of those people, like I hate to say this, but like kind of say it, like the white girl in the group of all black people, but like the cool white girl, you know what I mean? Like that kind of mindset, like where she is like a part of the black culture in a sense, besides her skin color. She knows like the customs, the traditions, the like different things, that the beautiful things in the black culture, but like she's not being disrespectful. She's not like culturally assimilating she's being respectful, and it's like just a part of her. So even though I was raised by my mom who's white, I was raised with like black culture, if that makes sense. Like my mom cooks soul food. My mom like listens to hip hop and R&B and like Earth, Wind and Fire, Donna Summers, Diana Ross. Like that was her, like Method Man from Wu-Tang Clan is like her celebrity crush of all time. Like she dated someone that looked just like Method Man. It was kind of gross, but like kind of cool. Like, just to give you a preface though, like even though I was raised by a white woman, I was still raised within black culture, right? And so that was like a great experience to shape me, because after living with her and coming to the city and seeing just the diversity of different races, I never felt like that person that was like ever like not black enough to be black, but not white enough to be white. And I know that some biracial people have had that issue, maybe in the neighborhoods that they grew up in, of feeling like they wasn't enough of whatever race that they were a part of because they were biracial, you know, and the people in that race that were fully just that one specific race didn't see them or accept them in that community. So for me, I did not have that experience, and I cannot say I did. I found myself though, because of my upbringing and because just being kind of a mature person than my age, that I would fit into all different types of groups. Being biracial too, in the way I look, a lot of people also thought I was Latino. So I like going through like middle school and high school, I would be in circles of friends that were black, that were white, that were Latino. Listen, I had a whole group of like Filipino friends that I was a part of, and I didn't speak a lick of Tagalog, but I don't know, I just found myself in their circle, and just kind of like a chameleon, able to, I wouldn't say adapt, but just like I fit in every place. And I think it's because my mom was like someone different. She was a white woman dating someone of color, and she experienced her own form of discrimination within the family and within other people, because at the time she was dating my dad, like interracial couples was still not as taboo as before them, but it was still like people would see and be like, you know, and make comments and stuff. So it wasn't very common. So being raised by someone who already experienced being marginalized and also experienced being discriminated against made my experience and my upbringing made me a more like open-minded, well-rounded person, because she was more open-minded and well-rounded. And so through that experience, I kind of just like fit into different circles of friends. And even my circle of friends is very diverse, even up till now. So that is like my experience with being biracial and like my upbringing, so forth, and within different communities that I identify as.
All right. Yeah, if y'all have any other questions, feel free to submit them in the chat. Continue to chat in the chat box. We only have like 25 minutes left, but we'll make sure to hop back and answer a few more of the Q&As after a few more questions. Do you want to talk a little bit about your experience in ballroom culture?
Yes. So I was born in White Plains, Westchester County, raised in Yonkers. Yonkers is my hometown. And when I was old enough to like travel to the city, like 14, I started going to the Village, which is like basically 7th Avenue and like Christopher Street. That neighborhood, that 5 to 6 block area is like Greenwich Village, where the Stonewall Inn is at. But also it was if you go down Christopher Street to the West Side Highway, that's where the pier is. And back during the 80s and 90s, that was a kind of spot for POC queer people to hang out, for trans women to work and cruise because they couldn't get other jobs. So like sex work was like the main source of work. So that was the area that a lot of POC queer people congregated. Homeless youth, POC youth as well would be there. And the ballroom community, which if those who don't know, if you've seen Legendary or Pose, that's the ballroom community. It's a community where they have competitions called balls, and then you have teams which are called houses, and they're like family units. There's a mom, there's a dad, there's like a godmother, godfather, all of those things. And so the ballroom community was created by POC queer people, specifically Black and Latino, trans and non-binary queer people back in the day to offer a space to be seen within the queer community and being POC. So when I started going to the Village, we would go like walk down Christopher Street, see all these queer spaces. We were under 21, obviously, so we couldn't go into any of the bars or anything. But in the pier, we would go and you would see a lot of house members and ballroom community members like just voguing in the pier, voguing in like the parks and stuff, and like playing music. And so I found an interest in it. And I remember going to a house party one time, and there was someone that was a voguer, and he started voguing, and I don't know what came over me, but I literally just started like not copying him, but like emulating some of his moves, like the duck walk and like his hand performance, and then just having a great time. And then from there we like kept in touch, and then I would start going to the Village more often and start like learning from people that were just voguing at the piers. And then from there I got involved in the community. I joined my first house when I was 15, the House of Manolo Blahnik, and I was in college as well. So like that, no, I wasn't in college. I joined my first house, and then after I graduated high school, in college, I stayed in the ballroom community, stayed in the ballroom scene. I walked several balls, which means I attended and like competed in them. I learned how to vogue from there, and it was great. It was the experience of it was good because I was in an environment where I was around people who looked like me, that were queer, and I didn't feel like the token Black person or the token POC person in the group. It was other biracial people that were in the scene. It was other Black people. It was other Latinos. It was other feminine queer people too, which for me growing up, being a feminine gay man, it was like I had struggled with, because I was like, everyone wants masculine gay men. That's what's attractive. That's what's the thing. Being feminine, you're obvious. You people can tell you're queer because of like how feminine I was. So being in a space where like being feminine was celebrated too was just like, oh, this feels great. And also being able to perform was always fun, and like showing off my like dance moves. And I do like competitions. I'm not like competitive like in a nasty way, but I do like competitions. So having that drive to compete against other people, and like I won a few balls that I competed into, was really, really fun and like liberating to be in a space where I felt represented, seen, and welcomed, all in one. So yeah, that was my experience about. I am still in the ballroom scene now, but like because of drag and my schedule, I'm not as active. So I haven't walked the ball in like a few years, but I am a part of a different house now.
Yeah, and if people want to know more about what voguing is and like duck walk and the what you were talking about, check out Zach's Instagram. You want to type that in the chat again?
Yes. So you can find me on my Instagram at the Inita D. That's on Instagram. Yes, I spelled Anita with an I and not an A. I post usually, I'll post today too, where I'm going to be at throughout the week. When I perform, I incorporate a lot of my voguing into my performance too. So you will definitely see that at my shows. And one thing I will say for the ballroom community and for those that go, because this has been like an issue since it got named this and it, like, or misnamed this. When you see what people call a death drop, it is not called a death drop. Just try your best to stop saying it, especially if you go to queer spaces and you see someone voguing and you see them do it and they're doing it correctly, and you go up to them and be like, oh, that's a nice death drop. If there's someone that knows their history and knowledge, it's not called a death drop, it's called a dip, like cheese dip, or cakes, or like the spinach and artichoke dip. It's a dip. It's called a dip. That is the terminology. That's the proper terminology for it within the ballroom community. It just got called the death drop when like Chris Brown did it in one of his music videos, and they kind of like, he like jokingly said it, and it just became something that stuck through mainstream media. But it's just it's a little bit unfortunate because it's kind of cringeworthy when I hear it from people, because it's just like it's like almost like a cultural appropriation. Like you're taking something that's from a community, and instead of acknowledging and celebrating it, it's being named something else that is not even close to the name of it, and people think that's the name of it. So if you guys take anything away from the ballroom community aspect of this panel discussion, whenever you see that move happen, try to call it a dip as much as possible. Even if they say dip, 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 do that. Don't call it a death trap, because that's not the terminology for it. And we want to celebrate other people's cultures, not not appropriate their culture.
Karma's already started following you. You'll probably see me on the Instagram too. You'll see a less professional Sarah, but you'll probably see me there.
But still a respectful Sarah.
Oh, absolutely, always.
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna ask one more question to cover one more topic, and then we'll get back to the Q&A for the last like 15 or so minutes.
Yeah.
Changing gears a little bit. So I know you're a swim instructor by day, like not every day, but related to that, there's been a lot of stuff in the news and legislation about kids and drag queens.
Oh yeah.
Or kids and queer people, right? And so can you just talk a little bit about how you navigate people's judgments about queer people working with kids, whether that's like the parents or guardians, your coworkers, your students? Because I know you're very out and proud, and you know you wear your nails sometimes when you're working. So what's been your experience?
So I'm just trying to figure out where to start with this. I think first and foremost, the painted picture or the tagline of grooming children, right, is very bogus. and that like drag queens are inappropriate and all those things. Here's the thing. I tell people this all the time on shows. I don't wear a wig, take my genitals to make a different genital, and wear these outfits that are like layers and layers and layers. And in the summertime when it's hot as hell, excuse my language, to see children and corrupt them to become something. And the other thing too is like, what am I grooming them to be? Because if I'm grooming, here's my thing. Drag queens are artists at the end of the day. And I know this sounds funny, but like we are glamorous clowns. I say this all the time. We are done up in makeup. We are wearing costumes like a clown is, which you take your children to all the time to see, whether you have them booked at your birthday parties for your kids, whether you have them, you take them to your kids to the circus, or to like a festival or a carnival, and you see a clown and you celebrate these clowns, right? But you don't say anything about a clown seeing your child or grooming your child to be like them, right? But then when it comes to a queer person who is a glamorous clown showing up to your kids, then I think the issue that makes you uncomfortable is not that I'm a performer in a costume and makeup, it's that I'm a queer person. And so the storyline that politicians are using and people that are conservative are using is really a scapegoat to hide their inner transphobia and homophobia, because they're afraid that if we're around their kids will also end up queer or trans as well. And that should be addressed, not the fact that I'm showing up doing a drag queen story hour, okay? That's really not the case. And the other thing too is, if I am grooming your child to be a drag queen, what is so wrong with that? How many, show me the stats of drag queens that are murderers. Show me the stats of how many drag queens have been arrested for pedophilia. Show me the stats of how many drag queens have been arrested for larceny, for vandalism of properties. Like, you get what I'm saying? And I don't mean to bring the church in, but I'm going to bring the church in. Show me the stats of how many people within churches and places of worship have been excommunicated from their place of worship or have been arrested for pedophilia, for people that attend their church. Show me how many politicians have been arrested or have stepped down from their roles for pedophilia or for sexual harassment or for fraudulent charges of stealing money and using their funds. You get what I'm saying? So in comparison to my community of drag queens and drag artists, compared to other people who are also saying this crap about us, like, your stats don't really add up. So if you want to go for stats and on facts, let's go on stats and facts, all right? Your community has a lot more people that have been caught and arrested and on file and in statistics of doing these negative things that you're accusing my community of doing. And so when people say like, oh, I don't want my child to be around someone, I don't want them to be influenced by a drag queen because they're reading them a story hour in presentable clothing, then my question is always like, what do you really not want? And 9 times out of 10 is you just don't want your child around a queer person because you don't like queer people. And you're afraid that your child will be queer. And my other thing too about it is that when people also try to use the explanation of like, well, drag queens have foul mouths and they curse and they do sexual things and stuff like that. Yes, but at a time and a place. I have never seen a drag queen story hour where drag queens are reading a story to children and they're in a bra and panty and that's it. Do you know what I mean? I have never seen a drag queen story hour where a drag queen or a drag king is reading a story about WAP or a sexual erotic novel to kids. Do you get what I'm saying? Like, no one is doing that. So you cannot but where have I seen the vulgarity or sexual jokes or like outfits that are risque? At adult bars where you have to be 21 and over to attend, or at drag brunches that are, if there is adult content, the venues are 21 and over. Listen, this industry that I'm a part of is catered to who is booking us. And if you are a professional and good drag performer, you will alter your content to the gig that you are doing. Like, I am on this panel right now talking to everyone. I'm not cursing up a storm, but you get me at my industry bar on Monday night and I'm cursing. because I'm in a setting that is adult, 21 and over, people are drinking, we're at a bar. So my conversations and the way I speak is going to be different than me on a Zoom call at 1:34 in the afternoon with the sun up. You know what I mean? Just like what I'm going to perform, the songs that I'm going to do, the numbers that I'm going to do are going to be different at a brunch where there are kids there than it would at a show Saturday night at like $3 Bill in Brooklyn. So it's just like the narratives that these people, these politicians, these people that are conservative try to say about my community is just so tiring and such, I'm gonna say it because it does get me frustrated. It's just such bullshit because it's like I'm a believer, and if I'm gonna say something or make a statement, I need to have facts and documents to back up that statement. So if you're gonna say that my community of adult entertainers glamorize like glorious and glamorized like clowns essentially are grooming your children into bad people of America, what statistics and facts and evidence do you have to back that up besides your own uncomfortability with my community? Because had you taken the time to actually attend a drag queen story hour, you would just realize it's a story hour with someone in makeup and a costume that is family appropriate. Had you taken the time to go to a family friendly drag brunch, you would see that we are wearing appropriate clothing, we are performing songs that you already probably know, and we're being entertaining, like if it's a circus show or if it's a Broadway show off Broadway. But people want to make these opinions and these assumptions on us because they are in their own transphobia and homophobia, and they don't take the time to learn about my community. And that's what's frustrating, is like you're just saying nonsense and you're not saying things that you can back up with facts. And what's even more frustrating is that people are following these politicians and people in power being like, yeah, yeah, yeah. And I'm like, do your research. It's so frustrating. You want to vote for someone to put bans on drag shows, but has never been to a drag show, or you want to vote for this politician who's saying that we're grooming people, but then he's caught a week later texting an underage person or having sex with one of his assistants. Like, do you get like, it's just like the hypocrisy is wild in this country sometimes. And that's what just gets so frustrating for me, is that my community is being attacked and people are following these people blindly and not even doing research. Whereas like when I have shows sometimes, and this happens like sometimes, if I have like brunches and there's like straight women that go and their partners go, I'll have those men that go that you can clearly tell they're only there for their girl. They want nothing to do with the show. They literally would rather be out somewhere else, and they're there. And then by the end of the show, a lot of them are like, that was actually really fun. And their whole demeanor changes, their interaction changes, their mindset changes, because they went in with these misconceptions of my community, with these assumptions of my community, and then they just realize like, you're a human being that's here to work and have a good time and perform. And I'm like, yes, that's the purpose. I'm not here to corrupt your relationship. I'm not here to convert you. I'm here to literally do my job, make a paycheck, pay my bills like anyone else. I just happen to be wearing a wig and a costume and makeup to do it. And so like that's just like the whole thing when it comes to this attack on drag queens and this attack on trans people, is like, we're literally just trying to, like, I'm just trying to work and I'm just trying to authentically be myself. I don't give two craps about converting any kids, converting any adults. And on the flip side too, like on the other thing too about shows, when they try to say like we're very vulgar and stuff, they'll find videos. Like there was one video of this drag queen at a drag brunch performing like WAP by Cardi B, and there was a family with kids. And in my mind, I was like, darn it, because they're gonna try to use that and be like, this is all drag queens, right? And I'm like, that's one experience from the thousands of shows that happen every day around the USA. Secondly, on the flip side too, and just being honest, if this queen was able to, or if it was me and I saw that there was a family of kids, I would have changed my numbers and altered my performances to be family friendly. However, sometimes when you send your music in advance, you can't change it. So that happens. And thirdly, that's not the drag queen's fault. If the venue is family friendly, then it should be also advertised as family friendly, or it should be advertised as 21 and plus. It's just the same like bars. It's just the same like movies. Some movies are rated R because of the content they have. Some movies are PG-13. It's the same thing with some shows. Most of the shows are like, in a sense, in areas that are the show would be received well because of the demographic that's there. So you know what I mean? You do a drag queen story hour, it's in a library that is family friendly. So then they hire, or you have people that are doing family friendly content, reading family friendly books. I have a show at a bar. It's a bar where it's 21 and over. Everyone is an adult. That is free range. People are already cursing. People are doing this, doing that, talking about this and that. So I'm going to have content that is for a mature audience because it's catered to that audience. So like these misconceptions and these narratives that people are making about us are just like bogus because there's no facts to back it up. Woo! Got me worked up there.
Yes, and I appreciate every second of that. And I know you're tired of talking about it. I'm tired of talking about it. Like it's everywhere. It's really just like, can we exist?
Yeah, I'm just trying to get up, go out, work, and come home. Like I don't care. And I tell this is the joke that I tell people. I don't get up and put on makeup and a costume for your child's allowance, for your kid's $1 at a show. Do you think I want their money? No, I want the parents' money. Okay. I want the parents' tips. I'm putting on a wig and a dress or a leotard or a jumpsuit from Fashion Nova for the moms and dads to come to my show and give me some money and tip me and the paycheck I'm going to get from this venue. I'm not getting up for your child's 50 cents. Girl, get out of here.
Right. Like it's like cute when a kid maybe
It's cute when a
gives you
kid gives
$1,
me
but like that's not where the money's at.
their parents, like their mom and dad gives them $1 or $2 or even a 10, and then they give it to us. Like that is great because like you're showing your kids the kind of customs of these shows, and that's beautiful. And I love it. And also seeing the kid have fun and enjoy. Yes, but realistically, I'm not getting up and doing drag every day or at my shows hoping that kids come to give me $1.
Right.
That's not paying my rent. My rent is way more than $1.
Right. Especially in New York City.
Especially in New York City.
Yeah, like this is your job. Like drag is your job.
Point blank period.
So there's a question about well, kind of a two-part question, but have you ever faced personal adversity to your identity, which you've kind of talked about? And also maybe related to that, how did your family support you or maybe not support you when you first started doing drag or when you first came out?
Oh, great. So my mom has been super supportive when I started drag. Initially I went to Pace, like I said, to be a lawyer, and then midway through my college career, I decided to minor in dance because I wanted to be in something entertaining, and law was not doing it for me. So I switched to just focusing on business management and minoring in dance. I was already a performer before doing drag. I was in like a few musicals in like middle school and like high school. And then in college, I joined my fraternity. And then I also was like step captain. So I was performing way before I slapped on a wig. And my mom was always supportive of me performing. She just was more like, do whatever you want to do, but just be smart about it. Like still go to school for your business degrees so that if anything happens, you have a fall, like a safety net of this degree that you can use in case you can't dance anymore or perform. Once I started doing drag too, the same thing. I mean, she did have like that kind of initial question, which a lot of people that don't know that or associate drag with being trans asked. She was asking me if I was becoming a woman.
Yeah, that's an interesting point too to touch on.
Yeah, she was asking me if I was becoming a woman because, you know, being a cisgender man, I'm like, now I'm starting to dress up as like I'm wearing wigs and stuff. And then you have that question of like the cross-dressing community, and then you have the trans community, and like some people take steps to get into coming out as trans. So she at first was like, does this mean you're coming out as a woman, or do you want to become a woman? Like she asked me those questions, and I was like, no, honestly, I'm wearing this wig because now I can dance in the center and not be a backup dancer, and I like it. And I want the attention. And so after that too, she has continued to be one of my biggest supports. My dad as well. I didn't grow up with my dad, and we just had a very tumultuous relationship growing up. But when I went to college, we kind of like started working on repairing that, and he was more present in my life and just kind of like checking in and seeing how I was doing. So he was supportive too of my drag. Whenever I posted stuff on social media, he would comment and call me and check up on me and see what shows I'm doing and stuff like that. So both my parents, my dad passed away 3 years ago, so he's no longer with us. But before he passed away too, he was very supportive. So both my parents, luckily, were very supportive of my drag career when I started it as well.
And your mom has seen you perform, right?
Yeah, I've had my mom. She's seen me about 3 times now live in person perform, which has been great. The first time though, it was kind of like in like not the most favorable positions, because she came for my dad's like funeral, because she lives in California now with my little brother. So she came over because we had the funeral service, like the wake and everything. But then I had a show that weekend, a brunch, and then a show that night, and she came to both. And then when I went to LA recently, or like the second to last time that I went to LA, I had a brunch there too, and she came with a lot of my LA friends that are out there too, and she came and watched and lived her best life. And it's so funny because it's very embarrassing, like supportive mom. She's like, "That's my baby, that's my baby." I'm like, "Oh God, man, oh Lord." But it's
I
great to
love
have her.
that.
Yeah, it's like embarrassing, but a good embarrassment. I'd rather have that than have a parent that like doesn't support, doesn't want to see it, doesn't want to talk about it. If I am around them or talk to them or interact with them, have to hear that condescending, like not accepting voice. So I'd rather be embarrassed because my mom is like letting everyone know that I'm her child than be shunned and disowned.
Yeah, and next time my mom visits me, I'm gonna bring her to one of your shows.
Yes. Everyone bring their moms, bring the parents, bring
Yes.
bring the
Yeah.
aunties too.
All right, there's a few other like anonymous questions in the chat. I
Yeah.
don't know if we really have time to answer all of them.
Well, I can get quickly to 2 of these.
Okay, yeah,
The
go for it.
one about there is not much discussion of intersex. There's a movie coming out on Friday, June 30th about this topic. Would you recommend this to see to help understand this gender or cisgender, or would it be non-real too commercial? To answer that, I don't know what movie this is and what's coming out. I would say though, if you are, I mean, it doesn't hurt to watch it to see what they present in the movie. I don't know if it's a documentary or if it's a fictional storyline. So that's the thing. If it's a documentary, then it's going to have hopefully people's personal experiences like in their interviews. So I think that would be good to see people's perspectives on that topic of intersex. If it's not a documentary, it's like just a fictional kind of thing. Understand it's fabricated, so it might not portray things that are actually factual within the community. Just like when the Stonewall movie came out, the most recent Stonewall movie came out, and it was like they portrayed that it was white queer people that started the riot, and that's like was just like yeah, like no, a little tone deaf. Again, it was kind of based off of real life events, but it wasn't a documentary. So if it's a documentary, I would say watch it. If it's not, you can still watch it. Just be aware that it might be fabricated. Are polyamorous people included in the LGBTQI plus community? I mean, that is kind of like yeah, I mean, there are people that I know that are polyamorous that are within a community too. They're not shunned and excluded. Honestly, the only people that are like not in the label of it or like specifically included is heterosexual. Because like it in a sense, because they're like viewed as our allies, within the community. But that can get tricky too with like trans people who also identify as heterosexuals. Like that's a whole lot. So that's another panel. And I'm not of someone trans, so that should be a panel with someone that is trans to share their experience, because you would get more authentic point of views than me. And then, are there any videos that I can show my class to visually show the continued struggle of LGBTQIA plus in this country? I found a story of a high school class putting on a play in the state of Indiana. Yeah, there are 3 different movies and shows that I think are really good to watch, because they do show you different struggles that we face, but also they do show you different struggles faced within different parts of America. If you want to just know about history of the ballroom community, Paris is Burning is one of the well-known, like, around the world films. It's filmed in like the early like 90s and stuff. It focuses on the ballroom scene community within New York City. You learn about the kind of like starting of the ballroom community. You learn about more queer lingo that's used. You learn about a lot of the people that are interviewed are trans women too. So you learn about, like I said, how the pier used to be like a huge spot for sex worker, like trans sex workers. You'll learn about that because it's during that time period. It's a great one to watch. It's a really, really good movie to watch. There is also on HBO, or now called Max, I think, Shangela, Eureka, and Bob have this show called We're Here. And they're 3 drag queens. And basically each episode they go to different like small town or rural neighborhoods, areas in the country. And they each meet like someone that lives there that is either queer or has a queer partner or family member. And they, like, at the end of the episode, do like a big show and they have them perform. But during the episode, you learn about that community. You can see maybe the transphobia that's there, the homophobia that's there, the like racism that's also still in some of these towns and cities. It's a really good one. It's more current. It's like just they have a second season now, or a third. It's a really good thing to watch because it's kind of like a documentary in a sense, but like you get to see the small neighborhood, like towns and cities, even in like places in California and Texas and New York, or like in New Jersey. And you see that even in New Jersey across the river, there's a town that is like very, very, very conservative and very red. So those are the 2 that pop up in my head to watch, and you can show your class. Because you get an idea of queer culture and the ballroom scene. And then the second one is you can see the communities and the lack of representation that are in some of these smaller communities or more rural or more conservative neighborhoods. And you can see the struggles that people that live in that community that are under the queer umbrella face. Yeah, so those are to answer those 3.
Wow, I love how you just fit in those 3 so quick. All right, so we do have to wrap up now.
Yep.
But there's so much love for you in the chat, Zach. People are really appreciated.
Oh, thank you, everyone.
Yeah. Tracy says you should definitely carve out more time for public speaking, and I agree.
I did pass it in college. I had the best grade out of everyone. Thank you.
All right. Well, that was a fantastic hour and a half that flew by. Thank you so much, Zach. If you want to stay on for a little bit so we can debrief. And thank you everybody for attending, for submitting questions, for saying fun things in the chat. And stay tuned for DEI's next event. We'll have some coming up in the fall.
Beautiful. Bye, everyone.